You ever stare at your account after it finally crosses $100,000 and feel, nothing? Or worse, you feel this tiny jolt of panic like, okay, now I've got something to lose. You're supposed to feel, made it, but your brain's already running disaster scenarios. Sound familiar? Look, you're not broken. That weird feeling is actually a signal that you've hit the part where the game changes. The habits that got you to $100,000 can accidentally block the jump to 1 million if you keep playing them the same way. Because getting to 100,000 is mostly you pushing. Hours, discipline, saying no, staying scrappy. Getting from 100,000 to 1 million is mostly you building a system that keeps moving even when you're busy, tired, or distracted. Same destination, totally different vehicle. Here's where almost everyone interrupts the path. They treat 100,000 like a trophy instead of a launch pad. They relax the wrong things, they tighten the wrong things, and they start making decisions that feel adult but quietly sabotage compounding. So here's how this is going to go. First, I'll show you the interruption patterns that kill the jump from 6 figures to 7. Then we'll build a simple scoreboard that tells you exactly what matters at this stage. Finally, I'll give you the small set of moves that keep your momentum without turning your life into a budget prison. Let's make this real with a quick anchor. If you've got $100,000 invested and it grows at about 7% a year, that's roughly $7,000 of growth in a year without you doing anything extra. If you've got $10,000 invested, that same 7% is about $700. Same market, totally different feeling. That's why 100,000 feels like an identity shift. Your money's finally heavy enough to start pulling. But if you keep treating it like fragile glass, you'll park it in cash until things calm down and the whole point of this stage disappears. The biggest lie in the middle is that you need a perfect investment to reach 1 million. Nah. The real difference is whether you keep the compounding uninterrupted long enough for the math to turn unfair in your favor. Think about your money like a boulder you finally got moving. The hardest part wasn't rolling it fast, it was getting it to budge at all. And yeah, you can recover from mistakes. You can. But the reason this path feels hard isn't because 1 million is impossible. It's because interruptions are sneaky. They don't look like failure. They look like, I deserve this, I'll restart next month, and I'm just being safe. So take a breath. You're already ahead of the pack if you've hit 100,000. The only question now is whether you're going to protect the momentum you built or accidentally reset the clock every couple years. The first interruption is the pause button lifestyle. You buy the nicer car, move into the nicer place, start taking the nicer trips, and your investing turns into whatever's left. Nothing explodes. You're still paying bills. But the compounding gets starved. Here's the reality. A $100,000 portfolio doesn't become a $1 million portfolio because you stared at it harder. It becomes that because you kept feeding it while time did its thing. The first interruption is the pause button lifestyle. You buy the nicer car, move into the nicer place, start taking the nicer trips, and your investing turns into whatever's left. Nothing explodes. You're still paying bills, but the compounding gets starved. Here's the reality. A $100,000 portfolio doesn't become a $1 million portfolio because you stared at it harder. It becomes that because you kept feeding it while time did its thing. Let me show you why the pause button is brutal. Say you're investing $1,500 a month. That's $18,000 a year. If you pause that for 2 years because life is expensive right now, that's $36,000 you didn't invest. But it's not just $36,000, it's $36,000 plus the years of growth it would have stacked on top of. And the scarier part is, you usually don't pause once. You pause, restart, pause again when the roof leaks. Restart, pause when the market drops, restart when things feel better. Those little gaps add up way faster than people expect. Common mistake right here. People think they're being responsible by waiting for the perfect moment. They tell themselves they'll invest again when they feel more certain. But certainty is expensive. The market charges you for waiting. The second interruption is the cash hoard hangover. Early on, cash feels like oxygen because it keeps emergencies from turning into debt. But once you're past 100,000, too much cash turns into a comfort blanket that costs you real money. If you keep, say, $50,000 extra in a low-yield account for years because it feels safe, you're not just being cautious. You're choosing to trade long-term growth for short-term comfort. That might be worth it for your mental health at first, but it can quietly delay the 1 million moment by years. The third interruption is the strategy hopping problem. You start with simple index funds, then you hear about options, then crypto, then a friend's real estate flip, then some hot stock tip, and suddenly your plan's a junk drawer. That's not diversification. That's distraction. Here's what's wild. You don't need to be brilliant to reach 1 million. You need to be consistent. Most people aren't losing because they picked bad investments. They're losing because they keep interrupting decent ones. Now let's talk about the shift nobody names out loud. When you were building toward 100,000, saving an extra $500 felt powerful. You could feel the progress. Past 100,000, $500 still matters, but it doesn't feel as satisfying because the chart barely moves. That's when people get bored and start making big moves just to feel something. That boredom is dangerous. So here's the better approach. You stop chasing excitement and you start chasing repeatability. You want a plan you can follow on your worst month, not just your best month. This week, set up an automatic investment transfer that happens within 24 hours of payday, even if it's small, because consistency beats motivation every single time. Now, I want to build a scoreboard that keeps you from overthinking this stage. Because if you've got a scoreboard, you don't need vibes. You don't need the news. You don't need your buddy's hot take. The scoreboard has 4 numbers that matter more than anything else: your savings rate, your contribution amount, your time horizon, and your interruption rate, meaning how often you stop, pull out, or change plans. Let's start with savings rate. If you invest 10% of your take-home pay, you're moving. If you invest 20%, you're accelerating. If you invest 30%, you're basically cheating, assuming you can do it without hating your life. The trap is thinking you've gotta hit some magical percentage forever. You don't. What you need is an upward trend over time. Here's an example that hits home. 2 people both have 100,000 invested. Person A invests 1,000 a month. Person B invests 2,000 a month. Both average 7%. After 15 years, person B doesn't just have double. Person B has a totally different life. That gap isn't because person B is smarter. It's because the contribution rate is the lever that matters most in the middle. Now let's talk time horizon. If you're trying to turn 100,000 into 1 million in 5 years, you're basically asking for heroics. That pushes people into gambling, but if you give it 15 to 20 years with steady contributions, it turns into a math problem. And math problems are way less stressful than gambles. Quick reality check with clean numbers. $100,000 growing at 7% for 20 years becomes roughly 400,000, not 1 million. So the remaining 600,000 comes from contributions and growth on those contributions. If you invest around $1,000 a month for 20 years at roughly 7%, you're in the neighborhood of 1 million. If you can push that closer to $2,000 a month as your income grows, the timeline shrinks a lot. Notice what's not in that sentence. Picking the next winning stock. Now, interruption rate. This is the one nobody tracks, but it's the whole video title. Most people don't fail because they never start. They fail because they keep stopping. If you invest consistently for 3 years, then cash out for a car, then restart, then cash out for a kitchen, then restart, you're basically taking a chainsaw to your compounding tree every time it starts to grow. Common mistake number 2, treating investing as a nice-to-have that comes after lifestyle. That flips the order. Lifestyle should be what's left after. Your future is funded, not what decides whether your future gets funded. Here's a case study that's painfully normal. A guy hits $120,000 invested at about 31. He feels proud, and he should. Then he upgrades his truck and his apartment at the same time. His monthly costs jump by $800. He tells himself it's fine because he got a raise. For the next 3 years, he invests almost nothing. Not zero, but close enough that it doesn't matter. The market has a couple of great years in there, and he barely participates. At 34, he looks up and he's at maybe 150,000. He tells himself investing doesn't work because he's been stuck for years. But he wasn't stuck. He was paused. Now rewind the same story with one change. He still upgrades something because life's meant to be lived. But he chooses one upgrade, not two, and he keeps investing $1,500 a month. After 3 years, he's not at 150. He's closer to 200 plus, depending on the market. That difference doesn't feel huge in year 1. It feels massive in year 10. That's what interruptions do. They steal your future quietly. Here's the better approach in that exact moment. When your income rises, you decide in advance how much of every raise goes to you now versus you later. A clean rule that works for a lot of people is the half and half split. If your paycheck goes up by $500 a month, you let your lifestyle rise by about $250, and you automatically invest the other $250. You still feel the upgrade and you still accelerate. You don't have to choose between joy and progress. This week, pick a raise split rule and set it as a default. Because if you wait until the money hits your account, it'll disappear like it always does. Now, I want to hit the fear part, because fear is what causes the worst interruptions. Once you've got 6 figures invested, a normal market drop feels personal. A 10% drop on 100,000 is $10,000 on the screen. That's rent. That's a vacation. That's a used car. Your brain screams, "Stop the bleeding." But that's not bleeding, that's volatility. The people who reach 1 million aren't fearless. They're just structured. They build a safety buffer so they don't have to touch investments when life punches them. They keep enough cash for real emergencies, not for emotional comfort. And they automate the investing so their mood doesn't get a vote. Sometimes the market's going to drop hard and it'll feel awful, even if you're doing everything right. So what's enough cash? For a lot of people with steady income, 3 to 6 months of core expenses is a strong range. Not 3 to 6 months of perfect life spending. Core expenses: housing, food, insurance, utilities, minimum debt payments. That's the firewall between your life and your portfolio. If you've got that firewall, you're way less likely to sell at the bottom because your car needed repairs. Now let's zoom into the middle stage target that matters more than the 1 million headline. Getting to about 250,000 to 500,000 invested. Why? Because at 500,000, a 7% year is around $35,000 of growth. That's the point where your money starts doing the kind of work that feels unfair. And once you see that happen, you stop thinking like a saver and start thinking like an owner. So how do you get from 100,000 to 500,000 without losing your mind? You focus on the boring trio: consistent contributions, steady income growth, and not sabotaging yourself with lifestyle spikes. Income growth matters a lot here, but not in a grind forever way, in a leverage way. If you can increase your income by $10,000 a year and you invest half of that increase, that's $5,000 more invested per year without cutting your current lifestyle at all. Do that a few times over a decade, and your contribution rate climbs faster than your spending does. That's the quiet advantage. Another common mistake I see: people stay obsessed with tiny expense cuts long after they've outgrown them. They'll spend 2 hours optimizing a grocery bill to save $20, but they won't spend 2 hours updating a resume, negotiating, or building a skill that could add $10,000 to their income. Frugal habits are great. Misplaced effort isn't. Now, I'm not telling you to blow money. I'm telling you to put your energy where it returns the most. If you're already saving, your next big lever is earning. And if you're thinking, "That's easy to say," I get it. But this isn't about becoming a completely new person. It's about one solid move at a time. Maybe it's switching companies after you've built some experience. Maybe it's a certification. Maybe it's finally asking for the raise you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a side income that's actually stable, not a random hustle that burns you out. Even an extra $500 a month invested can change the timeline. Let's do another clean math picture. If you invest $1,500 a month, that's $18,000 a year. If you bump that to $2,000 a month, that's $24,000 a year. That $6,000 difference doesn't feel life-changing this month. Over 15 years with compounding, it's enormous. That's why the path gets interrupted. People look for something dramatic. And the real answer is usually a slightly higher contribution rate kept boringly consistent. Now let's talk about investing behavior without turning this into a finance textbook. At this stage, your goal isn't to be clever. Your goal is to be durable. Durable means you can keep investing when headlines are scary. Durable means you don't need to touch the money for random wants because you planned for wants separately. Durable means your plan doesn't depend on you timing anything. So if you're investing mostly in broad diversified funds for long-term growth, and you're contributing every paycheck, you're already doing the core thing right. Where people mess it up is when they start improving the plan every time they feel anxious. They'll check their accountant. They'll sell a little to lock in gains. They'll hold off contributions because a crash is coming. They'll jump to whatever's been hot lately. That's not managing risk. That's letting emotions trade your account. Here's a simple decision tree you can run anytime you feel that itch. If you need the money within the next 3 to 5 years, it probably shouldn't be in volatile investments. If you don't need it for 10 plus years, short-term drops aren't a reason to change the plan. If you're investing for retirement and you're decades away, the biggest risk isn't volatility. It's not owning enough growth assets long enough. Now, that doesn't mean you ignore risk, it means you define it correctly. The real risk in the 100,000 to 1 million stretch is quitting early. So what keeps you from quitting early? 2 things: a plan that matches your life and a clear reason you're doing this. Because if your only reason is 1 million sounds cool, you'll get distracted by shiny purchases. If your reason is freedom, time, options, and not feeling trapped at work, you'll protect the plan. Let's bring this back to the title. The path almost everyone interrupts. Most interruptions happen in 3 moments: right after a raise, right after a market drop, right after a big life change. Those are the danger zones. So you don't wait for them. You pre-decide. After a raise, your raise split rule kicks in automatically. After a market drop, your auto-invest still happens, like nothing changed. After a life change, you reduce contributions if you must, but you don't go to zero unless it's a true emergency. That last point matters a lot. People treat not ideal as stop. If you can only invest $300 a month for a while, invest $300 a month. Keeping the chain unbroken is powerful because restarting is always harder than continuing. Now, we're moving into the last part of the journey, the part where you're closer to 1 million, and the numbers start swinging harder. This is where your scoreboard becomes your shield. At around 500,000 invested, a normal year can move your net worth more than your annual contributions. That's cool, and it's also emotionally weird. Because now, your results can look amazing or terrible, and you didn't do anything different. That's when people either get cocky or scared. Cocky leads to over-leverage and dumb bets. Scared leads to parking everything in cash and missing growth. The better approach is steady stewardship. You keep the same habits, you keep the same contribution rhythm, and you tighten the parts that prevent catastrophic mistakes. Catastrophic mistakes aren't the market dipped. Catastrophic mistakes are panic selling, taking on huge high-interest debt, or yanking money out over and over for lifestyle spikes. So let's run 2 quick examples with the same scoreboard. Example 1, you've got 500,000 invested, you're contributing $2,000 a month, and you get a scary year where the market drops 15%. On paper, you're down 75,000. That number will mess with your head if you don't have a firewall. But if you've got your emergency cash set, your bills are covered, and your job's stable, that drop isn't a reason to sell. It's a reason to keep contributing. Because those contributions are buying more shares at lower prices. Example 2, you've got 500,000 invested. You're contributing $2,000 a month, and you get a strong year where the market rises 15%. On paper, you're up 75,000. That number can also mess with your head. People start thinking they're geniuses. They start taking risks they don't understand. They start doubling down because it feels easy. That's when you stick to the same plan. You don't punish yourself for success by getting reckless. Both examples are the same lesson. Your behavior matters more than the year you get. Now here's a move that keeps you from interrupting yourself when life gets tempting. Make your big lifestyle upgrades cash flow funded, not portfolio funded whenever possible. If you want the nicer car, build the payment into your monthly cash flow and keep investing. If you want the remodel, plan it with a sinking fund over time instead of ripping money out of your investments every time the urge hits. Because selling investments to fund lifestyle is the cleanest way to reset your compounding clock. And yeah, sometimes you'll sell for a house down payment or something meaningful. That's life. The point isn't never touch it. The point is, don't make it a habit. This week, write down the 3 most likely interruptions you'll face in the next year, and set one simple rule for each, so you don't have to improvise when you're stressed. If you do that, you're miles ahead, because most people only think about their plan when something goes wrong. Now, I'm going to land this with a simple way to measure progress that doesn't rely on vibes.